Well, hello guys, and welcome back to a very rainy day here in the UK. I'm getting started on making the remaining parts for the RS-style spoiler project. So, cracking out the gel coat onto the moulds which are already in the curing oven, and I'm touching up a few of the localised damages from removing the parts from the mould last time. I'll probably come to regret how much I've just put on, but hopefully it'll cure nice and evenly and I'll be able to sand it all flush and make it look lovely. So the outside temperature's hitting a toasty 15 degrees, which is enough time to cure the gel and get on with that glass fibre layup for the strakes. So they're in the oven, and I'm warming things up with a heat gun. I should really invest in some sort of robot. So leaving that to now run, propped up by the broom once again, and looking at the total mess that I've managed to make with that first layup. There's fibre and gel and bits and bobs everywhere, but I've come to the conclusion that I could probably do with some more resin and more bits and bobs. Heated the oven up to a nice 40 degrees to leave everything to cure, and I'll come back to it a few hours later and demould. So now having a look at how well these have cured overnight, it looks like that area is solidifying quite nicely and ready for sanding down. I've also touched up any of the other parts where there were any weaknesses or chips in the gel coat. Okay guys, so I've got the next batch of composite components curing in the oven just there. So they're the remaining strake parts. I need to make the vertical bits in the centre of the spoiler and the inner part of the end plate. So that should allow the bolting between the upper and the lower spoiler. Basically, I'm building a little kit of parts out on the floor ready for trimming. So after this, I've just got the lower spoiler to go, the moulds up on the shelf. So hopefully, in a couple of days' time, I'll have that all finished and they'll all be ready for trimming. The problem with trimming is the amount of dust, and it's not something I'm looking forward to at all. So I was going to have a go at maybe 3D printing a guard for my angle grinder. I've got a nice diamond disc for it. I don't know if you can see this up here, which I'm going to stick into the angle grinder. Basically, it's a super thin turbo diamond cutting disc. So it's everything you could possibly dream of for cutting composites. So the intention would be maybe to build a 3D printed enclosure around this, maybe leave a half an inch or so poking out of the bottom so I can just edge around the outside of the parts. I will probably then have to sand and Dremel and refine that shape. It's going to be really hard to cut a kind of inside curve as well using a straight edge without causing a lot of damage. So that's going to be a learning experience. I don't want to be scrapping bits at this point. So I'm probably going to go easy with this big blade and do a little bit more with a little one, spend a bit more time this time. Other issue I'm currently facing is low stock on my low-cost resin. So I bought this big 5-litre barrel back when I started the project, and it's almost run out. So I need to make sure I've got about 500 grams for the upper spoiler, 500 grams for the lower spoiler. So that includes a bit of wastage and maybe the need to kind of re-roller over things. I'm not sure if there's quite a kilo in there. We'll see how we go. Worst case, I just have to buy a bit more in, but hoping to get by with what we've got here, and then I won't have to buy any more for a while. Guys, I also wanted to share with you some of the upcoming projects I've got for the car, maybe just to quickly talk through some of the parts I've got on the shelves and what I'm planning for the Fiesta next. So let's take a look. So up here, I've got a big red brake caliper rebuild kit. So the plan here is to redo all the pistons on the front brakes, to strip off all the paint and the rust and start again with those calipers, give them a full refurb back to the bare metal. Got the old Cosworth rep inlet there. I'm also going to have a look, I think up the top. In here is a brand new radiator and all the ancillary hoses for the Fiesta. So I should be able to get those fitted soon. I'm also going to sort out some gas struts for the back. I think I've got a fancy PCV hose. If you're a Fiesta man, you know these things split for a pastime. So I've got a really good quality, nice thick silicone one, which I should be able to clamp on. And then behind here, I've got some proper bonnet vents that can be cut into the bonnet. Now, rather than take a gamble on my lovely performance blue one, I managed to blag a really cheap bonnet. It's going to be wrapped anyway, which doesn't matter too much, I suppose. As long as the surface is relatively smooth, there's no big dents in it. It's going to be white with a massive martini stripe down the middle. And either side of that, those RS bonnet vents. Yes, bonnet vents. So looking forward to getting that done. Behind that, you'll notice there's boot. Now, why does the engineer have a boot? Well, I think I'm going to turn that into a build jig for the spoiler so I can stop wrecking the back of my lovely car. So that can be my interface that I build onto, that I drill holes back through for fitting the inserts onto the spoiler so that they can be bolted down onto the car. It also gives me options for the future if I'm wanting to do any other prototyping with the back of the car, that I haven't then got to go and wreck my pride and joy, which is now wrapped, and I don't want to go through the pain of doing again. So now popping those remaining parts out of the oven, you can see those strakes have cured very nicely. Nicely consolidated, not too many air bubbles, so hopefully that gel coat will be well supported. The first one released really nicely with just a few wedges around the edge, so I thought I'd be bold and try and do it one-handed. So 3D printed wedge between the glass fibre and the edge of the mould, and then we're trying to propagate or grow the crack along. So once we've made that initial pop, we're then chasing that round the outside of the part, which you can see here, just between the mould and the gel coat, until it's all freed up, and it should release itself quite well. I can really recommend the Easy Composites Easy Lee's release agent. It's done a fantastic job. Gives a really nice surface finish for those parts where I have polished the moulds up properly, and it'll even release from the rougher stuff around the outside. So taking these over to the pile of bits, I've now got all the parts necessary to make the strakes. I've got half a set of end plates and the upper spoilers. So now doing the inner parts of the end plates, I've spent quite a long time on remodelling these because I managed to chip these areas where you can see, I suppose, the more complex geometries, things with a tighter curve. So the trick I've done this time is to smooth in, use a little bit of wax in those areas to help release it a little bit more easily when it's all cured, and to really try and chase out the air bubbles in those areas with the roller. Now here we are, a day later, wedging those out. I really took my time with those in the hope that I'll be able to free them up. Again, chasing the crack round the outside of the mould. And there we go. And that's actually released quite well. That sort of strange waffly wavy pattern on the surface is for I slightly melted the 3D print that I was using underneath. But that's fine, it'll all sand out, and I'll top up the gel coat as necessary. So I'm very pleased with how that's turned out. I think I've now got all those end plates, apart from the waviness, I'm pretty happy. A little bit of wax in the corner really helped with the release as well. So top tip, if you're ever trying to do any composite moulding, give that a try. Gel coating of the lower spoiler completed. I'm now looking at kitting the fibre. This is a really important structural part. It connects the boot of the car onto the spoiler, and then the spoiler upper deck and the end plates connect to it. So we're going to have a combination of chop strand mat that you can see me marking up here, and we'll also be using some woven fabric for local reinforcement, which is really important to help manage the bolting loads and for later bonding onto it with fastener attachments. So to act as a reminder for the regions that need reinforcing, I've taken the original buck mould that I made for the lower spoiler, handcrafted lovingly, and I'm using that for reference for where I need to place the fabric. So now marking up the whole position straight onto the fabric and tracing around the parts just to give an idea for the size of that reinforcement strap. Nothing special, but this is the thing that will give it most of the strength and rigidity locally without adding too much weight. Sharpie markers proving really handy here for marking out. Actually, it's perfect for the job, and I can then follow around with a pair of scissors and trim all the necessary bits. Now I've marked up where the fastener interfaces are going to be. So there we go. So let's do a dry run of the kit. So in goes the chop strand mat, which will form the interface layer between the gel coat and the fibres. We then lay in some fibre reinforcing in those areas where we're going to see the bolting and the highest loads. One for the centre section, and then an overlap on the left hand side and right hand side of the spoiler. Now we're taking a look at the pre-curing of the lower spoiler part. You can see these local little air bubbles and imperfections that I will roller out before it does cure in the oven. We're really focusing the effort on making sure you've got that good connection from the structural fasteners to each other and in the areas that are going to see the highest loads on the part. To help out with consolidation, I'm also warming the resin, which reduces the viscosity, makes it a bit more compliant, and also helps to free up any of those air bubbles. I think that's job done. So this is probably the last time I'm going to lay up any glass fibre for quite a while. Probably until I'm doing the joining up. I might sandwich a little bit of wet glass in there, but it kind of feels like a weight has been lifted, because this project has been in my mind for probably the last year and a half. And I'm really looking forward to getting these parts trimmed and fitted and ready to put on the car. So they're finally manufactured. The last bit has just gone in the oven for curing tonight. I'm very excited to see the results in the morning. So hang on in there. Let's see what happens next. So here we are the day after freeing up the parts from the oven. Let's have a look at the quality of the consolidation. Looks pretty decent to me. Nice, rock hard, ready to be demolded. So release the wedge and pop the part out. That's not too bad. Got a reasonable surface finish on that one. Little tiny bit of chipping in the corners, but nothing like as bad as I saw on the upper spoiler releasing that one for the first time. So I think this will be ready for trimming and freeing up any second. Let's add it onto the pile of all the bits. Bosh. And this is the upper section, which I suppose is the slightly more cosmetic part of that lower spoiler. Chasing the wedge around, propagating the crack through. I'm tending to find if you free up one end, you can then sort of chase it along the mould until the whole thing pops out. Like this. And there we have it, a lovely, shiny lower spoiler. All ready for trimming and bonding onto the other half. It's a bit of a windy one today, but you can see the kit all laid out behind me. It's so windy to be outside, but at least it's dry for a minute, so I can at least show you some stuff. Let's take a little closer look. Okay, this here is the lower spoiler assembly. This is the bit that interfaces with the boot, connection to the strake, connection to the end plate, and there should be at the very front a hole eventually for connecting onto the boot itself. But the whole of that bottom surface could be filled with Tiger Seal or something like that. This is the upper part of that lower spoiler, and you have the two penetrations for the strakes to go through. This is the upper spoiler. It has two connections onto the end plate on each side, but it's a much more simple design. You can see that quick repair I did with a bit of extra gel coat in the middle. All needs to be sanded down and polished up before I get on to doing paint. Now we're talking about the vertical strakes. There's two of them in total, a left and a right side, and the end plates, which I think took about 3 designs to get to the final state that you see here. But I'm really pleased with the end result. I think it's good enough once it's had a sand and it's all been glued together. So, fun fact, it's taken approximately 10 hours to get to this point in making the parts. So I probably put more effort into making the moulds in terms of time than actually into the final parts. So as with all these things that have quite a lot of a craft or a skill element to them, it's all about the preparation. So having good quality moulds will get you much better quality parts. And as I've gone along, I think my mould quality's improved quite a bit, and I'm seeing quite a bit of variability in the parts. But actually, I'm really happy with the results. This is my first time doing a project like this. I've learned a huge amount, and it's nice to add a new skill set to the arsenal. Now, time to nerd out and get some weights for the components. So putting a stack of the strakes together here. That set of 4 would be a complete spoiler. Obviously these are untrimmed, but they're coming in at 350 grams or so. Now looking at the example of one of the end plates, coming out about 480 grams, and the other end plate, not far off that. The complete lower spoiler assembly is fairly heavy, 1.3 kilos, and the upper spoiler assembly, for when it's not wobbling around too much, is in the kind of 780 gram range. So that total kit is 3.4 kilos untrimmed. I'm hoping I can get another kilo out of that by the time I've trimmed all the excess off. So let's go and find out what the weight of the OEM spoiler is. So I'm just going to whip that off the back of the car. It's actually relatively straightforward to do. There's a bolt on the left and right hand side and some sticky tape underneath. So with a bit of care and a bit of gentle upward pressure, you can separate the two bits once those bolts are off. There she goes. Let's get a weight. So that OEM spoiler is coming in at 1.7 kilos, and those untrimmed parts are about double at the moment. So it sets me a nice weight target. I'm going to try and be in the kind of 3 kilo range or less, I think, by the time this is all done. All fitted back on the car. So the next stage is a messy one, and why I've been a bit delayed in getting this video out. So actually we've got a diamond cutting blade which we fit to an angle grinder, and I bought myself a dust extraction unit here which plugs straight into the vacuum cleaner to help with removal of dust. Now make sure you've got your PPE on, good set of gloves, good set of goggles and a mask. It's not nice, it gets everywhere, and you really don't want it in your lungs. So the Hoover attachment just plugs in here. It makes life a lot easier and really cuts down on the dust. So here is a first attempt on a scrap part, doing some trimming. You can follow straight edges reasonably well, but if you get too close to the edge, you really make a mess of the gel coat. So it's going to take quite a bit of skill and patience. So what I think I'll do is a rough first cut and leave a little bit of margin on the edge of the part, and then finish up with a Dremel or a hand sander to get a final result. So this is my first attempt at trimming an actual part. This is one of the Strakes. That is a fantastic cutter, all plugged in, and I'm now taking the Dremel to it. So that basically gives me a bit more profile control up close. And I'm using an orbital sander held completely sort of parallel to the table edge to give a relatively flat interface. What I will need to do is put that back into the mould and just trim it exactly flush with the edge of the mould to help with the bonding later. But that's good enough for now. So, really pleased with how that's turned out. It's quite a lot of work trimming the flange around the outside of the part. So I was ending up using the Dremel and was getting through sanding bits like you wouldn't believe. But the other side, you can then kind of level out with the orbital sander and you end up with a nice flat interface you can butt up to the other part. So I think I found a process that works. It's just a bit time consuming, but the quality's good. I'm very happy. Now, making full use of my second camera that I treated myself to recently, I'm now able to get some slightly better footage of me working on parts hands-free. So this is literally the level of attention that you need to go through. What I didn't realise is a lot of that dust was getting flicked up into my eyes. And over the past week I've had a horrible eye infection with lots of bits of dust getting in and being trapped. I had to use loads of eye wash and eye drops to sort myself out. So really do take care. I'm going to use sealed goggles next time. These safety glasses just didn't do the trick. And there we have one final trimmed part. So thank you guys very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, please buy me a coffee. There's a link in the description. For now, Engineer out.